What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another highly combustible reaction. We're going to be jumping in the next one on our Netherlands journey. This is V-Day. Canadian veterans celebrated in the Netherlands. I'm excited for it. We learned a lot already about how some of the American troops get respected from the Dutch people. And it's like, it was moving. It was moving. It brought us all to tears. All of us were choked up during the triple reaction about Machaden. So let's jump in. Let's check this out. Let's see the kind of respect that they have for the Canadian veterans as well. My heart goes out to all veterans and your families. Like, legitimately, I don't care who you serve for, what country you serve for. We're a rare breed, and you got my respect 100%. Let's go. This one's coming out as via donation from Fred. Much, much love. I do appreciate the support. Let's go.
The Netherlands in the spring. Beautiful. Flowers in full bloom, parks pristine, streets spotless. It's a far cry from what the same spots were like 70 years ago. The Germans had leveled the cities, murdered those who got in the way, and sent tens of thousands of Jews to be gassed in death camps. The Dutch who were left were starving after the 5 years of brutal Nazi occupation. By 1945, they were so hungry, some were eating tulip bulbs to stay alive.
See, we didn't get into the whole history of why. Like, here we go again. We watched the Margaret thing, we did, and I didn't really understand that people out there actually held America or anybody else to such a high esteem. It was kind of shocking that anybody actually thought of us, even to this day, as like liberators. But it's because we've never been liberated ourselves. We don't know what that feels like. We don't know how we would handle it. We don't know any of that. And now seeing this, that people were so starving so much that they were eating tulip bulbs, like everybody's looking all emaciated. Like, it was real tough times for the Dutch. So this definitely shines a whole new light on the whole what it means to be occupied.
They were so hungry, some were eating tulip bulbs to stay alive.
The starved, rickets-ridden bodies of this Dutch family are witnesses to the treatment the Germans meted out to our friends in Holland.
That's when the Canadians arrived, blasting their way into towns like this one, Apeldoorn, crushing the Nazis, liberating the people. The Dutch have never forgotten, never. And this week, they'll be in these streets again, by the thousands, to welcome back some of those Canadians, now in their 90s, who gave them their country, their lives back. I've been coming here for 20 years, never ceasing to be amazed at the Dutch determination to say thank you. This street with its pennants and Canadian flags is representative of many streets across the Netherlands right now, as the Dutch mark the major contribution that Canada played in the liberation of their country half a century ago.
I'm very young. I only heard stories from my grandfather and grandmother. But yes, they freed us 50 years ago, so that's why I'm here.
I think it's a love affair between the Canadians and the Dutch.
Well, 60 years is an awfully long time, but not long enough for the Dutch to forget the pain, the loss, the suffering, and the oppression of living under Nazi rule all those years during the Second World War. And not long enough either to forget the liberation and those who brought it to them.
It's a beautiful day.
Wow.
I'm feeling liberated.
107,000 people left this place on the trains destined for the death camps of Nazi-occupied Europe. 102,000 of them perished in those camps. On days like this, the Dutch come to remember what happened here more than 65 years ago.
The camp life was dominated by the train. The train was taking away 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 prisoners, and you prayed being not on the list.
Why do they never forget? Just listen to some of the stories we've heard over the years.
And I said, do you eat that every day? Sure. You want some? I'll give you a whole loaf. A whole loaf of white bread. I ran to the house and I planted it on the breakfast table and I said, here, look at it. Canadians are here.
Look at this street sign in an Apeldoorn suburb. If the name looks Canadian, it's because it is. A dozen streets in this neighborhood are named after one of the almost 8,000 Canadians who never came home from the battle.
Wow.
What was it about those years?
It was a different world, a different war back then, but legitimately, war is hell on all sides. It doesn't matter if it's your so-called enemy. It doesn't matter if it's on your side. Everyone. All citizens take some sort of damage from war. But this is... We might have Iraq and Afghanistan now. The difference is that these people actually wanted help. These people actually wanted people to come and save them. Wow. And they got it. Like, good on the Canadians for rolling in hard, taking stuff back, freeing people. Like, that's legitimately something that you just would never, ever, ever forget. You would be... Yeah, I personally would feel like I was in debt to someone forever. If you save me from conditions like that, imagine how glorious that loaf of bread must look on the kitchen table after being starving.
Young
Come
men
on.
who through the generations the Dutch won't stop thanking. Who were those guys? George Beale was one of them, a major with the 48th Highlanders. Every few days he'd stop and write a letter home to his wife, Ruth, in Toronto. This is one of them. Here's what he said. My own darling, I haven't written you for 5 days. I didn't feel much like it, sweetie, as we were fighting again, and I was awfully busy, and we've been having a tough fight. At the moment, I'm sitting in a city called Apeldoorn, and the Queen's Palace is within 100 yards of me. That's the Queen's Palace, right over there. We're about 100 yards from it. He might have been right here. We entered the town proper this morning after a big advance from the Isle River. I'm fine, Ruth, so don't worry, although I'm very tired. The enemy's running like the devil again, and we have to chase him. The fighting was bloody, and the dying. But through it all, George wrote to Ruth about the love he had for his men. He wrote this one on Sunday, April 22nd. I have fought and lived with those men for over a year, and to me they seemed as though they were part of my family. They never refused to go any place I ordered, and did everything I asked them to, cheerfully and willingly, knowing...
That's legitimately... Like, I've worked with some of the best people in the world. It didn't matter where they came from. When I was in the Marine Corps, it was no color. There was no you're from here, you're from here. There was the man to your left and right. There was that camaraderie, that knowing that you would do anything for the person next to you, including take a bullet. And then you know that they would do the same. It's a bond that stretches beyond family. It's a bond that stretches for life. We don't even have to talk to each other every year. We don't even have to get together. But I know that if I got on the internet right now and I started messaging any of them, they would all be there in a heartbeat. Because that's the kind of bond we have. Like, it's crazy. The military bond between soldiers, Marines, airmen, sailors, like, it's unexplainable to normal people if you've never experienced it. Like, I've never, put it this way, I've been out now for a long time. I got out in 2007, and I've yet to find anything that has that kind of camaraderie, that kind of trust, that kind of love. It's most certainly something that we write back home about in letters.
For over a year, and to me they seemed as though they were part of my family. They never refused to go any place I ordered and did everything I asked them to, cheerfully and willingly, knowing most of the time that I might be sending them to their deaths. There were lots of individual Canadian heroes here, Army men like George Beale, but Air Force flyers too. 50 years ago, these fields near Nistelrode in southeastern Holland were home base for a Royal Canadian Air Force Spitfire squadron. One of those Canadian pilots was a 22-year-old chap from Lethbridge, Alberta, whose name was Richard Odette. Well, near the end of December 1944, Odette had flown more than 50 missions. But up until that point, he had scored no German kills. Well, on the 29th of December, 1944, all that changed. When Richard Odette flew out of one of these fields, he flew right into the history books. Before he returned, he had shot down 5 German aircraft. No other Canadian pilot, no other British pilot had scored that many victories in one mission. Meanwhile, frontline fighters broke through to capture key strategic locations. All this was happening as the Nazis were facing their final desperate days, until that last moment when the fighting and the dying suddenly stopped. 70 years ago this week, the war ended. And here's what George Beale wrote to Ruth on that same day. You can feel the emotion in his voice. Darling, you couldn't possibly have any idea just what kind of a reception it has been and still is. The people go simply mad. And I had the honor, darling, of being the leading vehicle, my Jeep. Any town we went through, the people crowded the roads and we had a most difficult time getting past them. They all want to touch your hand or even kiss you, and they simply pelted us with flowers. My Jeep looked like a florist shop. It does make all the hardships worthwhile when you see the joy of these liberated people. For this year's returning heroes, new medals from the local mayor.
Your memories, your thoughts guide us as we shape our future.
And new thoughts about an old battle.
Well, I was stationed here during the war as a Canadian Women's Army Corps, which I'm very proud of. And it brings back so many memories. And I always have a place in my heart for Holland, for Apeldoorn.
It's a great, great day, you know. For the little thing we did, we get so much, 1,000 times more time.
The Dutch people are so
The Dutch people are the
faithful to
best
us.
people in the world, and I mean it.
Wangeningen just down the road from Apeldoorn, in that little building. That's where the Germans finally surrendered. These extraordinary pictures capture the moment.
To the Commander-in-Chief, 21 Army Group. These forces to lay down their arms and to surrender unconditionally.
And there at the table, Canadian General George Kitching, distinguished then and just as distinguished when I chatted with him at the same table 50 years later. How do you feel when you come back in this room?
It's almost as if they're ghosts, as if you are the German on the opposite side of the table, Peter. It was full of people then. Any movement, it was a very quiet room. And in spite of the fact that there were 30 Canadian reporters, they were quiet.
The general is gone now, and so are many of the men who fought with him. But the ones who are left, the ones who still come, the ones the Dutch, young and old, still so adore, are here with their memories. The ones that hurt, the ones that leave them quiet, and the ones that somehow make them smile.
I've never felt that I sacrificed anything to be part of a liberating army.
There were so many Canadians who lost their lives.
They did so much and stay so humble. Even the other guy said, for that little thing that we did. That little thing was absolutely no little thing.
Lives here in the Netherlands. How did you handle that on a day-to-day basis?
I put it out of my mind altogether, but nonetheless I cry when I go to the cemetery and see my friends' graves.
I never learned to cry.
You never stopped doing that.
You just feel it inside.
What does it mean to you guys to be remembered the way you are here in this country, the way they look at you, the way they react to you?
It's 70 years ago that we were here, but still, the kids are still enthusiastic about what we did here 70 years ago. And I love to see kids the way they greet us and the way they look in such admiration at us, you know.
Really, it was something to feel the happiness, the joy of the liberation.
I asked the people I was staying with, what is this touching bit, you know? They asked permission to touch you, and I couldn't get over that, so they want to touch a liberator, and they want their children to touch a liberator.
20 years ago, I asked the then mayor of Apeldoorn why it was that the Dutch never forgot the Canadians. His answer was very simple, very direct. He said, you have to have been occupied to appreciate what freedom really means. And when you do, you never forget who gave it to you. That's why Canada is never forgotten here. Never.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. V-Day, Canadian veterans celebrated in the Netherlands. Celebrated for a very good reason. Celebrated for everything. Think about where they would be if they hadn't come. It's a tragic thing to think of. A lot of tough stories, beautiful stories, but still tough. The man say he cries every time he sees his brother and sister's graves. Like, legitimately, that's the way it is. As soon as you get there, it's just, you can't help it. It's something that I don't think I'll ever get over. It's something I don't think that I'll ever understand. Like, there's a lot of things that I'm sure a lot of these people went home. The ones that made it back home went home with just the same issues that we have today, although back then they weren't discovered. The whole PTSD, the whole problems from war. It's like a legitimate thing. I honestly used to be a PTSD doubter until I got out and realized all of the subtle changes that had been made to my own person, to my own personality. They go through so much and then they call it something for that tiny thing we did. Or I didn't feel like we did that much. That's a hero. That's a humble person doing something like that and staying humble. That's a hero, 100%. If you guys enjoyed it, definitely go show the original poster some love. We are doing so right now. Go show CBC News, The National, some love on their channel. I'm going to drop it down there inside of the description. Hit the like button if you liked it, the dislike button if you disliked it. Check out one of my other videos up there. Subscribe right here if you want to see more content, possibly your content. Until the next one, I'm highly combustible. You guys be happy, healthy, safe. I love you to the moon and back. Peace.